Members, we now move to the debate on the Student Loan Scheme Amendment Bill number 3. And we, part 1, and this is debate on clauses 4 to 12. The question is at part 1, stand part. Grant Robertson.
Mr Chair, in the first of what I suspect will be a number of contributions on part 1, I just want to sketch out where part 1 takes this House. On the Labor Party side of the House, we would very much like to come to Parliament and support practical measures to ensure that student loans are paid off. On this side of the House, we believe that when people borrow from the student loan scheme, they do have an obligation to repay those loans. It's within the original loan contracts that students sign that they will make those repayments. What I believe this House should be doing then is working out what is the best and most appropriate way to ensure that repayments come in, that we actually achieve the goal of the taxpayer who has been part of loaning this money to students sees that money return. And that should be the goal of us. What is the best way of making sure that that money comes back into the system? And the reality is that sadly this bill falls well short of actually making meaningful progress on that. What this bill does is simply implement a slogan or a gimmicky policy and says this is the answer to where we're going. And obviously in that regard, Mr Chair, I am referring to the matters that are contained within Clause 8 of the bill. And that is around the question of creating a criminal offence around default of overseas-based repayment obligations, and then the process through which a person liable under that can be arrested. And Mr Chair, it is quite clear to us on this side of the House that the time has come for a much more comprehensive review of how we ensure that we get timely repayments. This current government has introduced a number of measures that are designed to try and increase the amount of repayments that are coming back. Yet the debt overseas has continued to rise during the term of this government. So it's clear that while there will always be a measure of stick, the carrot here is missing, or the other kind of ideas that might be put on the table are missing, and I'll certainly return to those, Mr Chair, as we work through the debate. But where I wanted to start was the first part of Clause 8, which is the idea that there is now going to be an offence for borrowers who have not made the payments in the way that they are expected to. And this is the clause and the new offence in section 162A. And I want to refer members to the submission of the Legislation Advisory Committee to the Select Committee on this particular part of the bill. And the offence that is being created here, and I'll just read it out briefly, Mr Chair, the Clause 8 inserts into the bill a new offence for borrowers, and it says, every person commits an offence who is in default of his or her overseas-based repayment obligation and who, having been notified by the Commissioner that he or she is in default, knowingly fails to make reasonable efforts to pay the amount in default or to make arrangements with the Inland Revenue Department to pay the amount in default by the due date specified in the notification. Now, we will work through those words, but what the Legislation Advisory Committee says is essentially moving from what is now a civil matter and making it a criminal matter is actually a very significant change. It's actually fundamentally changing the nature of the relationship that student loan borrowers have with the Crown. And what the Legislation Advisory Committee said when they were commenting on this was, and I quote, the Legislation Advisory Committee considers that this, inclusion of the offence, is an unprincipled basis on which to create an offence. That is extremely strong language from the Legislation Advisory Committee, that this is an unprincipled basis on which to include a new offence, because the offence is simply created so that Inland Revenue can apply for an arrest warrant. So rather than making a case based around the severity of an offence or the damage incurred to the country or an individual
Try to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to leave the chair for the dinner break. This debate is interrupted. I shall resume the chair at 7:30.